Hello, and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. Today's video is sponsored by our Amazon affiliate link, which you'll see in the description below. You'll also see in the description below any links to videos I mentioned in this video. So today is part one of Philodendron hederaceaum revival. So this is the heart leaf philodendron here. You can see that the leaves have a heart shape on them. It's sometimes confused with the pothos, but this isn't a pothos, this is a philodendron. It's a whole different plant. It is a tropical evergreen trailing or climbing vine that grows up to about 13 feet tall in the jungles. And in your home, it can actually get to be a pretty nice plant as well. This one's going to be revived. I got this one, and it was, when I got it, it was planted too low in the pot, so I'm going to be reviving it. I have a video on how too low in the pot is not a great idea. It's also been droughted a few times, so it is, and it's definitely ready for a new pot and ready for some revival and ready for some good soil because it's been in the same soil, I was told, for a long time too. So this, as mentioned, has beautiful heart-shaped leaves. This is a lime green variety. There are also darker green varieties, or even some with variegated foliage on them as well. They're very easy to grow if you've got them in good soil and you give them medium light. They like medium light, but they will tolerate some lower light. They prefer average indoor temperatures, and they also like a little humidity, but they can also tolerate a lot of dry air too. So they're pretty versatile in that. So they're very, very pretty, versatile plant to grow in your indoor garden. They don't often get pests and diseases, rarely do they. So that's another great thing about them. And they can also be trained. They can either be used as a trailing plant, which you can see this looks very pretty trailing, or you can put in a trellis system and you can wind their foliage, their vines through the trellis, and that can be very attractive as well. You do need to wind it in and attach them a little bit when you do the trellising, because they aren't in the tropics. They do tend to keep growing, and they will just keep growing, but they don't have little tendrils that will attach, so you're going to need to get them growing in the direction that you want them to grow in. So you also, in terms of watering, you want to water them when they are approaching dryness. So on the moisture meter, about the 4 or so in the, if you have a moisture meter that starts at 4, is in the still a little bit moist, and then usually 1, 2, 3 is dry. So you want to get the 4 range or so. You don't want to overwater them because they will get root rot, but you do not want to underwater them, because what will happen, they will spring back. They are plants that will spring back from being droughted, but they will lose some of their leaves, which will then give you areas of the vine that don't have any leaves, and that's not as attractive. So do try to keep them well watered as they need it. Okay, so we're going to revive this guy here today, and the first step in revival generally, well, first of all, I watered him really well yesterday to get him ready because I don't want to shock him. If you are going to try to revive a plant and say you haven't watered yet, you do want to water him, at least give it an hour before you go ahead and repot, because that will allow the plant to soak up a little moisture. You want the leaves to have some moisture in them when you repot, because what happens when you repot a plant, the plant does become a little bit shocked. It will have some transplant shock going on, and when it does that, it's not going to take up water. So you want the plant to be hydrated before it goes into this little period of time, which can be several days or even a week or two, where it's not really taking up much water. So that's why that's important. I've also pre-moistened the soil here. I have this is ProMix that I like for house plants, for pots, container growing. It's one of my favorites. It has, it's moisture retentive, but it also has some draining agent. However, I usually add a little bit more of pumice, which is, I'll leave the link to this. This is my pumice that I carry. You can also get it other places. That gives you some nice drainage. We do want the philodendron to have good drainage because drainage, what happens with drainage is it gets a little bit of air to the root zone. You don't want too much air in the root zone because then the roots would dry out, but the roots are living things and they do need a little bit of air to thrive. I'm going to also add this is worm castings. I have videos on how great that is. I'm adding a little bit more to that. This soil has some in there, I believe, but I'm adding some more. And I am also going to add a little bit of my green gourmet houseplant food, which I will leave a link for as well. I'm going to add some of that to this too. And this soil was pre-moistened. You don't want it soggy, but you don't want to plant in dry soil because what happens once you plant in dry soil, when you water, the soil will sink and you won't have enough soil for the plant. So I'm going to mix it up into here, into the already moistened soil. You want it moist but not soggy. So you can make a ball. So it should be the consistency of you make a ball with this soil, but you could easily break it. You don't want it dripping water, so if you do, add more potting soil to dry it out or wait till it dries out before you plant in it. And but then again, if it was dry, it would not make a ball at all. Okay, so done that. Mixing. Now we got the soil ready. Now we have the tricky part of figuring out what size pot. I do have a repotting series and I have a couple videos on choosing pots. So this guy, and I've chosen a few here. You can see these in different sizes. And you will say, you may be looking at some of these and thinking, oh my gosh, it's really small. Well, first of all, we're reviving a plant. A lot of plants that need revival, this one doesn't show signs of root rot, but a lot of times when you are reviving a plant, it may be suffering from some root rot syndrome. So you definitely don't want to put it into too big of a pot. If you've been watching my videos, you will see that I talk frequently about the secret and that to good healthy growth, and that is 2/3 plant to 1/3 pot. So that being said, this little plant that is also doesn't have a whole bunch of soil in there, so probably not a lot of roots, I'm not going to be putting it in a big pot. But in order to determine what size pot I need, I'm going to need to look at the root zone as well. So I have some selections, and sometimes you may end up putting it back in the pot that it was in, especially if it's sunk. You can do that as well because it's sunk, so it's not using all that space effectively. So I'm going to take it out gently. This one's coming out pretty easy. Okay, now you can see here we don't have, and this is since it's old soil and I'm reviving, I'm not going to mix it in with the good soil. You can see we don't have a whole bunch of roots going on here because for one thing, there wasn't a whole bunch of soil, and that was one of the problems with the plant was having and why it needs a revival. So I'm going to take off a little more here. When a plant has been in a pot too long, something that will also happen is a lot of salt buildup, salinity buildup, and that's not good for plants. I have a video on that as well. So this is another good reason to repot the plant and also to take off some of this excess. Don't go too crazy. You don't want to shock the plant, but take off a little. Well, I am thinking, I wasn't sure when I started, but I'm thinking that this pot here is going to be the good pot for this plant because of this very small root mass. And it actually was a cup, but it has a drainage hole in it now. And I'm going to put a screen on there. It's actually drywall tape I like to use so that the soil won't fall out of that drainage hole. But you always want to plant in a drainage hole, with a pot with drainage hole. We could also go with this one, which actually looks really cool with the color, the green and the green. So this is another option. But another thing you want to do is look inside the pot. So how much more soil are you putting in? You don't want to put in any more than double the amount of soil that the plant came from. So I can go with either one of these. They're going to be similar. They're very similar. but I am thinking this one is just has a little bit less. There's going to be a little less soil in this one, so I'm going to go with this one to be on the safe side, and it'll still look really cool. It's got little frogs on it. You put in at least about an inch or so of soil, and I may want a little bit more. This is not going to be, it was very deep before. And I'm not going to be putting a lot of soil around the outside. The roots will probably go down more, and then but there will be some on the outside as well, because you do want to have extra soil on the outside as well as on the bottom. If you find that you think, you know what, I think I'm planting this a little bit too low, I need a little bit more soil on the bottom, which I think I do since there's so little roots here, you can take it out and do it again. Remember too, when you're patting down, you don't want to pound it, but you want to pat it down some, because it is going to settle once you plant, and you don't want the plant to be too low in the pot. What you want is about 1/4 of an inch around the inside rim of no soil, so when you water, the water doesn't roll over the top, but it stays in the soil. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'm going to fill in, and you want to gently lift, put some on the other side. Gently tamp down. It's called tamping when you're pushing on the soil here. So if you read tamping somewhere, you know what it is. A little bit more. Okay, so I'm good. About 1/4 of an inch there. You'll see got all these good nutrients and things in the plant. We'll clean off the plant afterwards. She's looking good, or actually this one's a boy, and yes, so this is George, apparently this is George. Okay, so George is looking good. Now, one thing we want to do is water right after planting, and you want to use lukewarm to tepid water always. So now I warmed this up before we started. Or actually got warm water. So you want to water slowly until the water drains out the drainage hole, which should be starting fairly soon. That tells you that you've well watered the whole thing, all of the soil, the whole pot itself, and the plant has sufficient water. Because what you do want to do, you don't want to overwater the plant later. So you don't want to water until the plant is, there we go. You don't want to water until the plant is approaching dryness, so more like on the 4 range. And I think I mentioned that earlier in the video too. On the moisture meter, or when the top inch or so has dried out. And if it's a smaller pot, you can go maybe that first half inch. Also, you can pick up, right now I've watered it very well. I can feel how heavy it is after being watered. And so I will know later when I go to pick up the pot and it's a lot lighter that it's also time to water. So that's another indicator of him needing water here. So there, I'm going to clean him off. It needs to be cleaned off good so you can see the little froggies on there. So you can see that that looks really nice now. And even just being higher up in the pot is going to help him considerably. We're going to check in again with him in a month or two and see how he's doing. And at that point, see if he needs some fertilizing. We did fertilize upon when we repotted right now. So we're not going to be, you don't want to, with philodendrons and most houseplants, you don't want to fertilize again until they start to grow new leaves, and a few new leaves, not just one little leaf picking coming out. So 2 or 3 new leaves. That tells you that the plant has become established in its new pot, new home, new soil, and that it is now growing again. And at that point, you can start fertilizing again. But in the meantime, let it settle. Let it any shock. Get over any shock from being transplanted. Get used to being in a really nice soil and in the right size pot and all that sort of thing. And then at a later date, go ahead and fertilize. In the meantime, however, make sure that the plant has the right kind of lighting and good air circulation, and that you water when the plant needs the water. So thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. And remember to like, comment, subscribe.